having opened that database, do you see something like this? Okay, great. So let's go first explore just a little bit what we're dealing with here. This is the element of Tableau that allows you to connect to various data sources. And generally speaking, within a given Tableau workbook, you will often connect with a single data source, a single database, excuse me, but you'll be connecting for different types of analyses with different subtables within this database, okay? Let's go take a look at what those subtables look like, the tables here, so that we can relate them to what we saw this morning with Kevin. So I'd like you to go over here to Excel, for example. Actually, let's go first to battery. Let's go click on that little little table that's there. Let me show you how I did that again. So here, you notice when I hover over this, there's a small table icon that appears. I'd like you to click on that, and it will load for me a certain number of rows, a small subset of that data, so that I can kind of browse what's there. And what do we see that lies before us? Can anyone narrate? What's this first column? What do you think that represents?
Unique identifier.
Yeah, unique identifier of a given participant. There's actually a little bit of a distinction I'm making. I'm assuming here a participant is the same as a phone. It's actually of a particular phone, but for the most part, that will correspond to a particular participant. You'll notice that there's an indication. This is the battery table, after all, whether it's plugged in or not. Not plugged in, it's plugged into the AC, and some of them will say plugged into USB. Status as to whether it's discharging or charging, current battery level, whether it's concealed. This is whether the snooze button is pressed. And if you drag this across, you'll see a number of other columns that I won't go into, but which Kevin briefly mentioned this morning. So Tableau provides you a way of kind of browsing the data on a per table basis and getting some feel for what's there for sure. Some of these tables the tables in general will differ radically from each other. So let's take a look, for example, at this survey table. This is actually quite different than than many of the others. This is not based on sensor data, but is instead based on responses to surveys. So once again, we see a certain amount of commonality. There's a certain orderliness to what we're seeing. We're seeing, once again, a creator ID and a timestamp. Remember, all the data collected here is timestamped, and it's recording who is sending it. But there's some differences here. One thing will indicate whether the survey timed out or not. Remember that notion of a survey that will time out if you don't answer it within a certain time? It may be set to sort of self-destruct after a certain amount of time. But there's also, and there is concealed, but there's also an answer that this person would have given as to whether they, in the past half hour, have smoked. Okay? This was a single item, single questionnaire that was asked. And you'll note that there's actually several types of data within this table. Some of them are numbers, 0, and if you scroll down further, you will find, in fact, ones scattered among there. But then there's this value null, which indicates basically no meaningful data collected. So it's almost like an NA. It's not applicable. Why not? Because it timed out. So there's no answer to this. It's not meaningful to think of it as 0 or 1. You'll notice that some of the timeouts also have nulls associated with them, which I believe are indicative of a case where there was perhaps the phone was actually not in a state to record data at that moment. I'd be interested to know what that is. But in any case, you wouldn't want to look at those that are null either. Excuse me. No, the null there means it did not time out. Excuse me. Null there means it did not time out, which is a very poor label, but that's fine. This means it did not time out, therefore there was data there. Okay. So this is a survey. Let's take a look at another one, Bluetooth. Okay, this was a study where no Bluetooth was collected, so there's actually no data here. If it did collect it, it would record basically the ID of other phones that were detected at a certain moment in time, and whether or not, in fact, the data recording was concealed. Concealment, the concealed column will indicate whether data is being suppressed actively by the user. So we know if the user has snoozed the phone, we want to know that the phone was capable of collecting data at this time. And simply it's being censored because by user request. That's a useful thing to know, to understand that the phone didn't simply run out of power or was simply unavailable and offline. Kevin? Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Query, you could say, if timeouts or if not timeouts, and that would actually evaluate whether that string compared to faster.
Yeah, okay.
There's a good reason for it. So it's not that it's actually in there field or it's a string field, but there's a trick that an empty string evaluates the false. Put it in a true false.
Yeah, that's hideous, and that should be banned. No, that's horrible. It should be a Boolean. It should be a Boolean. I'm a software engineer, and that rankles me. Oh man. Anyway, that's like using integers for true and false, which is horrible. Well, no, most emphatically not. There should be a type system that's well defined. In any case, let's look at accelerator here, or the accelerometer readings. So here we have creator IDs, timestamps is concealed, but we also have X, Y, and Z readings from the different accelerometers. And as Kevin noticed, and I think as Mohammed noted briefly, these are taken in the context of 3-axis accelerometry, and generally speaking, they will be combined in order to process the data, but sometimes you may want to look at each independently for certain types of analysis. So this is just a glimpse at some of the data that's collected here, and you'll find that there's many other tables, some of which are derivative upon this, and which we won't be going into. But my main focus today is to introduce you to some uses of Tableau for analyzing the sources of data. So you get some feel for sort of exploratory data analysis using this tool. So let's talk a little bit about the conceptual underpinnings for the sorts of analyses we'll be taking into account here. So Tableau is interactive data visualization exploration software. It can connect to diverse data sources, which include traditional relational databases, databases whose names you may have heard, such as MySQL, such as Oracle, DB2, and MS SQL Server, etc. It can also connect to text files, sources in spreadsheets like Excel, and NoSQL, which is a growing trend within the big data area that's used to handle data that doesn't fit neatly or with adequate performance into relational database context. And the outputs from Tableau that we'll be exploring will include both graphs and tables that we may wish to output in a textual fashion. So the conceptual model associated with Tableau is one of crosstabulation, which I think most of the people in the room from health science background would have encountered before. If I said that we're working with a crosstab, would that make sense to most people? Have you seen that before? Sort of a summary of a, say, breakdown of a population into different, say, age and sex groups. So you might have a total population of 1,000, perhaps, and there'll be males and females, and we'll have different age groups here. into age categories, and this might total up the number of males who are of this age group, say 0 to 4, and this would be the number of females of that age group. This would be 5 through 9. You're familiar with this sort of construct? They're also called contingency tables, and they are very popular within SPSS or SAS for sort of breaking down, slicing and dicing data from a given group. The basic mode of operation that we'll be exploring is we'll be taking data from some table. It'll be aggregated up but broken down into categories in a multidimensional fashion. And typically we'll be dealing with 1 or 2 dimensions. So we may break it down by male and female only, aggregating up across different ages, or we may break it down into age groups only, aggregating up across male and female, or we may break it down by both. And within the data to be broken down, it's not always simply counts. It could be counts, the number of people in each of these groups, but we might use a crosstab to summarize, for example, the prevalence of pertussis in these different younger age categories, right? That would be a familiar use in EPI. And we can do a similar thing here. We will have data that we wish to summarize across different breakdowns of the population, where that summarization metric may be to take the average, it may be to total it up, it may be to take a standard deviation. So the process we'll be going through is selecting data to be aggregated, select the dimensions by which to break it down. So the data to be aggregated might be counts. It might be prevalences of pertussis. It might be data on income levels for different ages. Select the dimensions by which to break down, the chart type to use, and then we may further put in place filtering or pages to see different subsets of the data, and we may want to have sort of visually distinctive indicators for certain types of information. So it sounds fancy, but we're gonna go through some exercises where you get a concrete feel for what I mean by this. Okay, so we're going to be summarizing up, for example, it may be accelerometry data. And we'll break it down into according to people according to their demographics, and we'll select a chart type that provides a bar graph, and then we will limit it to people who are over a certain age, something like that. Okay, so I want to introduce you to the basic user interface used to do this. So the first step, selecting data to be aggregated, we will be using data from the database and selecting, for example, data on location. And here we will have some data related, for example, to latitude and longitude, and whether the phone is concealed, the accuracy of it in meters, the creator ID. These will be different data items, and we will be choosing from these data items which data we wish to display. So we may be seeking to summarize information, for example, about the accuracy, or seeking to specify or to summarize information about the number of records of a certain sort. And then, in the next step, we'll be selecting the breakdown. That will occur not over here at the lower left, but we'll be instead dragging elements from here to this place in the upper right for the columns and the rows. Those will determine the columns and the rows associated with the structure that we're going to be defining. We will be selecting a chart type to impose, whether we wish to render this data as a table with text, whether we wish to render it with a bar chart, whether we wish to render it with a scatter plot, whether we wish to render it with a sort of Gantt chart, or with a map, for example. So we're going to be lending a rendering of this data that we've broken down in this fashion according to certain possible representations. And that can be chosen over here in this marks area where you choose which tool. It can also be assisted with this bar here if you're in automatic update mode, this one on the right. So here we'll sometimes be breaking data down, for example, as a pie chart, and other times as a line graph, other times as a bar chart. Okay? And so we'll be using these widgets again and again and again. Another thing you can do is you could choose visual distinctions that you wish to impose. For example, the data points, you may wish to distinguish them via color or via size or via some label that indicates a particular type of information. And you can choose that with this marks area, not this drop down, which sets the type of graph, but by dropping elements in each of these items. So we might, for example, drop the creator ID into color so that we have visually distinct colors for different creator IDs. Or we may drag into color here the plugged in description to indicate that we wish to have different colors indicate whether the device is plugged in or not. Okay? Another element that we may use is to impose a filter. This filter will basically restrict the display to certain subsets of the data. So we may, for example, wish to restrict the display of this crosstab here to children who are, up to and including 19 years old, and that's all. So we don't have other sort of rows of this. And so it is here. So in the filters area, you can drag an item there. Maybe it's the creator ID, or maybe it's the timestamp, and you can then choose to only include certain subsets. So by creator ID, you could select which phones do you want to see. For the timestamp, you may say, I only want to see data after a certain date. And it will only show that data after the certain date. Finally, we can select pages as well. And I guess they don't show it here. But up at the top here, we can basically set it so the graphs I see right now are for one subset of the population, but I can successively go through successive subsets of that population, displaying each of them in turn. So maybe I want to see the data just for the 0 to 4-year-olds, male and female, and then I want to see on a separate one 5 to 9, and then 10 to 14 on a separate graph, etc. And we could do that through the pages. Okay? So this is just orienting you. We're going to be coming back again and again and again to these elements associated with how we compose things, whether it's filtering, whether it's indicating with colors and other visual distinctions, whether it's indicating the type of graph, the breakdown, the rows and columns, and the data to be displayed. This elements on the left here will be an area to which we go back and forth because it is from this area, this data area, that we'll be dragging things to color, we'll be dragging things to columns and rows, we'll be dragging things to indicate what to display. Okay? So this is going to provide us with kind of this palette of data items that we'll be displaying and by which we'll be breaking things down. So this is a brief glimpse of some of the elements we'll be using. Any questions on this before diving in to take a look at this? You want to go? What do you think? Okay. So let's go through a bunch of exercises with this. Okay. So for the first exercise, ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to go and choose over here on the left-hand side this battery area, okay? There's going to be a battery data source. Remember, we're not yet in the point where we have all those widgets. First, we have to define a data source that will depend on batteries. And that data source, then we can start to drag those things over and break it down in different ways. There may be many sheets where we create different visuals that all depend on battery. So we're going to take battery here and we're going to drag it up to this table area, okay? So battery is going to be dragged up to the table area. And how did I do that? I clicked on battery, I dragged it over, and I released. Okay? So let me do that again. I will go down to this table area, click on this, drag over, and release it. Okay, the TA should get ready because things are gonna come thick and fast. Okay, so prepare for deployment. Okay, so are people in sync with me here? Are you in sync? Okay. Okay, great. So, ladies and gentlemen, what I'd like to do now is to go down here and click. It should say something like Sheet 1 here. You ready with that? Okay, let's click on Sheet 1. So what we're going to do is we'll actually double click here and give it a name. So we will call it battery. Hey, come on. Battery record count. Okay. Okay. So type battery record count here, and there we go. Battery record count. Okay. Boom. Just like that. See that? Are you folks okay? Okay. No one's needs TA help yet. Okay, so how did I get this? I double-clicked here and I entered it. You comfortable with that? Okay. Okay, so having done that, ladies and gentlemen, you will see that up here on the upper left, there's a battery label. Where did that come from? From whence did that come? Who created that? Sorry? It was in the database. In fact, that's what we just created. You created that. And you should be proud of it. Okay? The creator of that lies not in the stars, but in yourselves. So that's what we just created. It was called battery by virtue of the fact we dragged that battery in. We could have named it something different, but that's its default. Does everyone see that there? Who needs TA help? Who would like a TA to sit next to them? Okay? Okay, not yet? Okay, great. Okay, so this is going to serve as our data source for this this particular record, and it happens to be the only one, so it's selected here. Okay, so now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to go and drag here. Remember I said that we're going to specify what to aggregate. What we're aggregating over here is number of records. So I'd like you to take this number of records and drag it to this area. So you're going to click on it and drag there. Are you comfortable with that? Okay. Okay, so I'm clicking and dragging. And what appears there? Okay, it's the number of records in the battery table. This is a small study. Small but expertly managed by Norges, and this is the number of battery records that are shown, okay? Battery records there. So that's the total number of battery records in our database for this study. And what we're going to engage in is we're going to break this down into various types of crosstabs, okay? So ladies and gentlemen, I would like to drag over a creator ID into rows to break this down by rows. There we go. So how did I do that? I clicked here, creator ID into rows, and it breaks it down. Okay? There we go. So what is this? Anyone want to hazard a guess? What is this summarizing? Okay. Okay, these are the different phones here on the left. And what do you think these numbers are here? The number of records per phone. That's right. So we've just taken this number of records, and by dragging this creator ID, we basically said, summarize for me the number of records on a per phone basis. Okay? We've created this sort of crosstab. It's as if we've created this component of the crosstab, right? Let's go now to elaborate it. Let's drag over here the timestamp to the columns area, okay? So I just clicked on timestamp, and I've dragged it over here. Now, where it says year there, well, okay, tell me, what does this show here? This shows something a wee bit interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'd like to know something about that myself. But
time travel. 1999.
Yeah. So this is the most intriguing one. Here are two from 99 and 2000, and we've seen that before. That's if the phones are kept off for long periods of time and their internal battery runs out, they may collect a certain amount of data before they reconnect with the network, in which case now they know they're in 2015. 2016 is a bit of a mystery there. But let's change this from year, and I'd like to change it to today, okay? Today. And having changed it today, what are we seeing here? Does anyone want to hazard a guess? We're actually not seeing quite the thing you think. You have to be a little bit careful with this. This is a reason I'd like to emphasize this. So what are we seeing? What's the range over which we're seeing this, okay? Up to what maximum value? 31. Yeah. So day here is actually the day within the month. If you actually want sort of the actual day, the calendar day, you can do day down here. This will actually give the absolute day. This is day within month. So you have to be a little bit careful about that. So I'm going to click on the lower day, and it will then show me various sort of indicators here. And here are all the ones from 2015. So the next challenge for you folks, which you're going to tell me, is suppose I wanted to screen out. I only wanted to focus on those that are 2014 or later. How could I do that? How could I limit the data shown to just being for those 2014? What thing could I use here? Filter. Yeah. So let's go drag the timestamp into filter here. And you'll notice that I want to filter on, okay, I will say range of dates, yeah. So how did I do that? I clicked here, I dragged it to filters, and I want to choose on range of dates. And I want to click next, okay? And you'll notice it lets me select a range of dates using this sort of mechanism. And I would like to drag this over, and I'd like to drag it over to 2014, okay? And I'll set it, I'm not particular about the date, I'll set it to, well, let's set it to say, March 15th, 2015, okay? Around March, early March or mid-March, there we are, okay? Are people okay with that? Do you see this? Okay, and you can say apply here, and it will go do the requisite work, and it will show us, okay, this type of data there. Okay, that's great. And suppose we want to set this later data to only go through about the current date. So let's make it through about 8/11 or 8/12, something like that. The study actually ended well before that, so we could say okay, and now it's going to. Oh, okay, that's interesting. I thought I did that properly, but here we go. So I would have thought that would capture. capture it, but looks like, okay. Okay, sorry? Oh, I went back to 2014. Sorry, I'm sorry. Oh, man, thank you. So this should be 2015, sorry. I did it mid-March 2014. I'm a year behind. And then we'll want to go through about mid-August 2015. Yeah. There we go. Okay. So here we're getting some more specific ones. You notice these are the number of records that are collected on different days here. But this display is not terribly helpful. We're seeing things labeled, and we might be able to make them out. After all, if we hover over these, we can see how many records were created on different days. But we'd like to have a more kind of meaningful summary of this. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will now make use of different renderings of this. Okay? And I'd like to try a rendering using this scheme here. Okay? And what you will see here, so I just press this one, and what this does is visually summarizes the number of records received on different days according to the area of a square. So smaller squares indicate fewer records, and bigger squares indicate more records on a per person basis here. Do you see that? Were you able to do that? To use this item here? Okay, we could alternatively have specified it over there. Okay. So we can scroll over and we can see, generally the sort of ebb and flow of different people's data collection on different days. This is the battery. So as a general rule, if someone's keeping the phone charged, there should be battery records received. And you'll find that on some days there's very few, but in some days there's many. And generally different participants will vary in terms of the number of records that they've recorded. By hovering over these, you can get a total for different days, indicating the number of records received for that day. So this is an indication of the use of Tableau for one type of data. Okay? I'd like to now put in place another type of data. Okay? And this other type of data will be map data. Okay? This map data will be drawn from a different part of the database, the same database, but a different table in that database. So I just created a new worksheet using this little icon here. I clicked on it, and this worksheet canvas came up. And now what we're going to need to do is to go and set a data source, because we're not going to be drawing information from the battery, but information instead from the location data, the location table. So who needs TA help to help them with this? Are you okay so far? Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to right-click on the battery icon, and I'd like you to say duplicate. This is what we in computer science call a hack. It's a little trick, a little bit like encoding things with null. It's convenient and quick, and it does the job, but sometimes you learn to regret it later. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we just copied this. I'd like you now to right-click on it and edit it. Okay, so let me do that again. I hear the hubbub. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to delete this, and I am going to do that again. So let me just do close. Okay, here, let me do it again. I right-click on this. I think on the Macs it's Command-click. Control click. Okay. So, control click. Okay? Control click on that, and I'd like you to choose duplicate. Okay? Duplicate. Boom. Okay. Now, for this, I'd like you to control click and do edit data source. Okay? And for this data source, I would like you to type location as the name. And I'd like you to drag out battery. And I'd like you to scroll down and drag in location. Okay? Okay. How did I do that? Well, originally battery was here, but I'm going to go over here and say I had battery like that. You can either do an X here, you can drag it out, and then, as I said, I went down, scrolled down here, and I dragged in location. Okay? There we go. Location. Okay. People okay? Are you synced up? Are you? Do you want another minute to do that? Who would like another minute? Okay. So here's location. So, ladies and gentlemen, having done that, we now have recourse to a data source that provides location. Let's see what's in there. Let's go use this view data to see what's inside of that. What do you think would be inside of it? Riddle me that. Latitude and longitude, most emphatically. Accuracy in meters. Now, this is a terribly misnamed table. When I see it, it kind of gives me the willies. Because higher values of this means it's more inaccurate. Does that give you the heebie-jeebies also? Oh, man. It really troubles me. This is basically the standard deviation associated in meters associated with the measurements as I understand it, roughly. Yeah. Timestamp. The data source. Note some of these were judged by GPS, and I think network is an indication it actually got the information from Wi-Fi related. Wi-Fi or cellular? Okay. Cell towers. Yeah. And here's the creator ID. And again, is concealed. And some other ones like speed, which can be useful for distinguishing vehicular context. Speed is sort of estimated through the location. We're going to be making use of latitude and longitude as the main focus here. Okay, so you can close this. Are we in sync here? People okay? Okay, so now, ladies and gentlemen, having done that, let's go click on sheet 2, and we will call this participant location. So I double-clicked on this. Do you folks have, like, Neanderthal mice? Like they're single-click mice? Oh, man, there's no. They might be double-click mice, but it might be disabled. Okay. So can you double-click? Double-click, yeah. Yeah, okay. Sometimes? Okay. 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 Yes. So I double-clicked and I said participant locations. Are folks okay with that? This is on a new workbook. I had previously created it with this. Are people okay? Who needs TA help? Okay, great. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now what I'd like you to do is we're going to go someplace you've never gone before, okay? So we're going to go drag latitude to the rows. Now you'll notice that something weird happens. Well, at least it's weird in my book. That it shows a bar graph that summarizes, I think this is in fact the average of the latitudes as shown there. We actually will need to do something different here. This is very important. We need to click on this, drag down, and you need to set this as a dimension. You're not trying to summarize information about it. You want to sort of use that as an axis to display this information. So how did I do that? I went up here and I pulled this down and I said I chose dimension here rather than being a measure where I have to set whether it's the sum or the average. It's not something to be summarized. It's something that to use as an axis. So I pulled down and I went to dimension. Are people okay with that? Okay. Okay. You hanging in there? Okay. I don't know. That's disconcerting. Okay. Now let's drag longitude up to the columns. And similarly, let's drag that down and choose dimension. Okay. Now we see something of interest here. What do we see? Does anyone recognize certain geographic features or even polygonal shapes that may be familiar? Darn right. Darn right at Stephen Baker Lake. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, if you hover over this map, you will see that you have the ability to zoom in. And as you zoom in, you will see additional features appear. But it is still somewhat opaque. So I'd like you to actually go, well, we'll do something more to liven it up in just a minute. But first, I want to distinguish, ladies and gentlemen, I want to distinguish the dots here. Well, all these dots are blue. From whom are those dots drawn? From whence do they come? From which person, which participant? All of them. They're summary of all, right? We haven't told to break it down to participants. Suppose we wanted to make participant dots differ according to their color. How would we do that? Okay. Drag it into color. So let's go do that now. Creator ID drag to color. Okay. So now we have this chart broken down. You'll see that one participant, said participant Q greater than sign YG6, took a long sojourn to the fair province of Manitoba. But let's go zoom in on this cluster here. Let's go zoom in, ladies and gentlemen, on our fair city of Saskatoon. Okay? So I'd like you to drag this over, and I'd like you to click successively in, and you'll start to see different participants within our fair city delineated by color, and you'll see the different areas that they've traversed here. This was a very small study. We didn't have many participants, but they did cover a fair bit of the city in their sojourns. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, though, I'd like to add additional information to this map. I'd like to add, say, street information. So if you go up to map here, you should be able to pull down to map options. And you'll notice that over here in map options, there's options of displaying certain information. Certain of these features are less directly relevant to our prairie context. So the coastlines will confer little additional value for this graphic. Although in prehistoric times, they lapped the shores of nearby inland seas. But I'd like to click on streets and highways, and you will see arrayed before you the streets of our fair city, and you will see the various participant locations superimposed on that. Do you see that here? So you could play around with other things here if you wanted to, but suffice it to say that if you need more specifics at a detailed level, you will be able to see it. Okay. So this is location data for the participants, and you'll notice that it exhibits a certain granularity. In other words, there's no one for one reason or another between these points, and that seems to be due to rounding associated with the received values. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So so here there's sort of limited resolution within this. Now, is that inherent, Kevin, in the data received through G? I thought I've seen it with more decimal places in the actual underlying database.
Likely parser problem, putting in the wrong kind of.
That's what I'm wondering. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So thanks. Okay. So here we have information on a map, and I'd like you now to imagine, suppose you want to see a single participant here. How would you do that? Give me at least one way. How would you limit this to a single participant? We want to see data separately for each participant. Okay. So you could try clicking on colors. So I'm not sure I've ever done that. And yes, oh, look at that, a thing of beauty. Look at that. Oh, great. Oops. That was an unfortunate thing. Yes. Sweet. There's another way though. And to do this, we'll have to get rid of this map option. So you can close it here without fear. Win the X. And we can drag participant creator ID up to pages. Okay? And now we can page between different participant IDs here and display the values unique to different groups in the population. So this shows the kind of wanderings of particular individuals within this database in this map context. Okay? Okay, so you're getting a bit of a feel for this? Okay, shall we go further? Yes, Jeff. Sorry? Okay, the TAs? In front of the... Okay, so, ladies and gentlemen, does anyone else need TA help here? Okay, so we're exploring a lot of the basic mechanisms here. I'd like to now go and examine some additional options for analysis. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to create a new worksheet. Yes. Yeah.
You might quickly want to just do a filter on the accuracy, just to show.
Sure. That's great.
What happens
to
the clusters. A lot of.
Sure.
It's very likely, for example, that green cluster up by 3rd Avenue there is not actually a person wandering around that building. It's likely someone in that building, inside, getting sporadic, inaccurate GPS readings. They're then artificially bouncing them around randomly. Filter by accuracy, you begin to see where people actually are.
Okay, I'll take that a level higher maybe. So if we were to look at this, so I really like that idea, and we'll do this. But I'm also going to innovate it in a way that will give additional information on that. So ladies and gentlemen, if we looked at this graph, could we say anything about perhaps where that person was spending the most time? Right now, each of these dots could be, 40 different dots. It could be just a single time they were there. It's not so clear from context. So ladies and gentlemen, what I'd like to do is I'd like to right-click on this thing here, or control-click, and I'd like to say duplicate sheet. And this will allow us to duplicate this sheet, and I'd like to change it to say participant, I'm going to say participant location count. How's that? Is anyone okay? Is everyone okay with that? Participant location count. Okay? Now, what I'd like to do then is, right now we're only viewing one participant at a time because we're paging by participants. I'd like to take, therefore we don't need to distinguish them by color because it's only one participant type. So I'd like to drag creator ID out of color. Just drag it out of there so we no longer distinguish things by color. They will all become blue, which is going to be fine for our purpose. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I would actually like to summarize this information according to the number of records. So suppose I wanted to color them darker or lighter according to the number of records. How do you think I might do that? Anyone want to suggest how you might approach that? How might you approach that? Yeah, okay. So you could do it, size would size them differently to the number of records. If we actually just drag them to color, we'll get a lot of the way. Okay, so we drag to color here, and what we're going to see is that it'll actually color the darkness of this according to the number of records that have been reported at a given location. Okay, all of these. Okay, so actually, what we need to do is we need to do it, for that particular individual. Okay, so for example, if we go to this one here, we'll find this one here had a lot of readings here. 957 of their readings were right here, but for other individuals, this is actually the total number of records across all individuals, in fact. So what we will do is further, and this is a distinction, okay, because we have different pages for different individuals. I think what I'm going to do is to drag Creator ID out of pages, and I think I will drag Creator ID into filters, and I will choose, for example, the first Creator ID here. And here's the first Creator ID. You'll notice that for this particular individual, we had a disproportionate number of records at that point. If we went to another Creator ID, say the second one, we'll have more records there. So in short, we can summarize where people spent the most time according to the number of records that are landed at a certain point. We can recognize some of these represent many, many readings, but many of them represent just an occasional reading. Now, lending insight into this further, I'd like to go choose one of these in the filter, and I'd like to choose the first, this OWZ here, and I'd like to, how did I do that? Let's try that again. I did filter, and I chose OWZ, and I'm going to zoom out here, and I'm going to tell it further that I would like to filter it by the accuracy. So how would I do that? How would I filter it by accuracy, ladies and gentlemen? What could I do? Drag accuracy over to filter. And I want to filter on all values, yeah. And I'd like to not include values above a certain point. Remember, this is 2,879 meters, so that's 2.8 kilometers. I'd like to shrink this down to all things that are, say, below, 100 meters maybe? Something on that order. And I'm going to say apply here, and now I've got a subset of the data which have a higher accuracy associated with it. Okay. And maybe just to bring it out more clearly, I'll get rid of this number of records. So here we're focusing only on cases where there's fairly accurate data available. And you'll notice that accordingly, we have people, for example, here crossing the bridge here, and they're not that far off. This one is a little bit in the midst of the river. Okay, So this is maps, and you've seen how you can filter things, how you can display things, distinguish things. I'd like now to go through 2 or 3 additional exercises. So one thing I'd like you to do is to create a new worksheet here. And we're going to go and examine this. So this will be plugged in status. Okay. Okay. And what I'd like to do here is to go drag. So we're going to be using here battery here, and I'd like to drag in timestamp over to the columns area. Okay. And within this area, I'd like to take, it'll say year. So how did I do this? I selected battery, and I dragged timestamp over to columns. And I'd like to take this and like to say use the exact date. Okay? Okay. Next, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to go and take the okay. So right. Okay. And next, I'd like to put in the plugged in description. Excuse me, creator ID here. I'd like to drag it into the rows. There we go. So what do you think this will produce if we drag creator ID into the rows? Anyone? Yeah, this is taking a long time. Okay. Okay. So you've actually seen something like this before. Do you remember where you saw that? Yeah. So we're going to go now and expand this further, but I want to get rid of dates that are before 2015. So again, what do? There's actually 2 ways to do it. I could right-click on this and do scale axis if you'd like to, or I could do what? What can I do to only show things in a certain range? Filter. So I can drag to filter here. I can do range of dates, and I could set this to say start in mid-March, so 3/14, and go to the middle of August or so, and you should see something like that. Do you see that? Okay. Now, how would I color it so that we can delineate cases where it's plugged in or not? What do you think? What items over here would allow you to see whether it's plugged in? Yeah, the plugged in description. Good. So let's drag that down. It's an advantage of good naming. Let's drag it down to color. Okay. Okay, it's trying. Getting hit by a lot of things at the same time here. Oh, okay. Okay. So that would be good. Okay. So here you have a graph showing 3 different cases where it's not plugged in. It's plugged in to via AC or plugged into USB for a given user, right? So we can look at, for example, the patterns of charging associated with this device for a given user here. Okay? So that's another visual associated with this sort of data. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go to do something a little bit more advanced now before finishing up. So I'd like you to create a new worksheet here, sheet 5, and I'd like you to go and create a new data source, okay? And we're going to use a data source associated with smoking status, okay? So we're going to call this sheet smoking status by time, okay? Okay, and I'm going to call this, I will be releasing this sheet for you to look at in case any of you had trouble following it. So this will be, Tableau, exercise 8/2015, Saskatoon. Okay, great. So, ladies and gentlemen, how would I create a new data source that will tap into smoking information? What do I need to do to create a data source? Well, we did it before. Does anyone remember how we created this location one? Okay, yeah, so we right-clicked on this guy. We said duplicate, okay, and then we can right-click on it and say edit data source. And we're going to pull out battery, and we are going to call this one smoking status, okay? And we are going to find the appropriate table here. So the smoking status here is indicated by this AOI. Okay, there's actually, excuse me, I'm going to do it via, there's a PP smoking table here. And I'm going to drag PP smoking up there. Where is that? It's down here, located down here in the tables. PP smoking, okay? Okay, now let's go see what's in PP smoking. So we're going to click on it, and you can see there's an indicator of the start time and the stop time associated with smoking, and there's an indicator here, is smoking, yes or no? Are people okay with that? Who needs TA help? Okay, TAs deploy. Sector 2. Okay. Okay, who else needs TA help? Okay, TAs deploy to Sector 2 left. Okay. Okay. Who else needs help? People following along? So what did I do? Let's rehearse it. I went to create smoking status by time. I then went and right-clicked on battery and I did duplicate. I then went to edit that, edit data source. I called it smoking status. I dragged out the battery table and I went down and I dragged in PP smoking. Are people comfortable with that? Remember, this was a study run by Narges that had intervals of smoking reported. And in fact, it had intervals of non-smoking for certain periods. For the first, Narges, how long was it? For the first, how many days they had to record both smoking and non-smoking intervals?
1 month.
Okay, but that was for smoking, but 3 days for non-smoking. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen. Sorry?
Sorry. Oh, it's okay, keep going.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, yes.
I am confused what a non-smoking interval.
So they recorded when they stopped smoking and when when a non-smoking interval would be from the last time they smoked to the next time.
How is that different from smoking?
Smoking interval is the time over which they smoke very specifically.
So after 3 days, they just indicated that they smoked?
Correct. Yeah. After 3 days, they only indicated that they smoked. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to now go back to where it was smoking status by time. And we are going to make sure smoking status here is selected, okay? Now, what I'd like to do is to drag start time to the columns. And we are going to, and initially, when you drag start time to the columns, it should say year of start time. You see that? And I'd like you to drag it down and choose exact date. Okay? What do you think that shows? What lies before us?
Everyone stopped.
Yeah, everyone all together sort of, they started smoking. In fact, actually, it includes some they started non-smoking. So it's particularly dense in the earlier phases. Okay, so that's great. Ladies and gentlemen, suppose now that we want to break it down according to creator ID. We want to see different rows for different people. How do we do that? What would we do? Instruct me. What would I do? Creator ID in rows. Yeah. So there we go. Boom. Okay. Okay. Now we see it broken down by person here. Okay. Great. Now suppose I wanted to distinguish whether someone or not was smoking at that time according to their color. How would I do that? Well, you'll notice there's is smoking. What could I do? Drag it to color. Okay, now, you'll notice that it says something very strange. Some of is smoking. We actually want it instead to consider this. We don't want this to be considered as a sum. We instead want it to be considered here as a dimension, okay? And it should be, in fact, a discrete dimension. So it should be dimension and then discrete. What do we see here? Of what did Narges speak not 5 minutes ago? What do we see? So null will mean, okay, there's no information about it. 0 is an indication that they're not smoking. 1 is an indication that they are smoking. What do we see in the first several days? Sorry? Yeah, there's a lot of non-smoking intervals, and with gaps between them. If they had it off person, for example, they weren't carrying it with them, and stop that interval. And then there's some periods of smoking interspersed here, and then there's a bunch of other periods where they reported smoking. Now, I'm glossing over some things. We haven't lent longitudinal extent to the duration of smoking. And we can do that by taking a difference between the stop time and the start time. But time is short, and we need to move on to additional topics. But suffice it to say that here we could delineate very clearly visually the periods of smoking and their duration, and distinguish them from the periods where not active non-smoking was recorded. Okay? People comfortable with that? Okay? So I'm giving you some ways you can explore this hugely voluminous data set, some way to grapple with all this data, which could otherwise be kind of challenging. But all of the analyses we've done yet, all of the analyses that have been the focus of our work thus far have been distinguished by the fact that they depend only on a certain table. One table. We haven't linked up data, say, from smoking with data regarding who's around them or data regarding, physical activity accelerometer. I'd like to give you a sense of how you can do that. While I don't have time to cover it all, I'll give you one final example where we do that, where we link together smoking status and location. Okay? Okay. If this proceeds well, we may examine one other small thing. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to create a new worksheet. How do I do that? Riddle me that. What do I do? Okay, yeah, so we could click on this thing right here is one way. Okay. And I'd like to say smoking status, smoking by location. Okay. And for this, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have to define a new data source because this is going to draw not on one, but on a pair of tables. So, how do I define a new data source? Okay, we can go up here and maybe right-click on smoking status and say what? Duplicate. Right? Remember that? Okay, and I'm going to edit this. Okay. And you'll notice there's PP smoking already there. What we want to do, are people in sync with me? Now I'm going to call this now smoking and location. This is a data source from which I'll draw. And ladies and gentlemen, it will cross-link information regarding location with information regarding their smoking status. Okay? So, are you ready to proceed? Are you ready to go where no person has gone before? Well, okay. Where no one in this room, except, a couple of us have gone before. Okay. Where none of you have gone before. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, so, yeah, fair enough. So I'd like you to drag up PP location to join PP smoking within this area. And you will see something unbeknownst to you. You will see something unfamiliar. And this thing will open a vista on new areas for your learning. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, here it is referring to the fact we're cross-linking PP location, PP smoking. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to have people's locations tied in with their smoking data. So we can ask, when someone's smoking, what's their location? The cross-link. Okay, so the trick will be here in having logic to link these up. And that logic lies in that overlap between circles there. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to click on this. Just like that. And you'll notice that there's a pitiful attempt at attempting to link them up, which is going to be insufficient. This one is not what we want. You have to be very careful about this. This is what's called performing a join in a relational database sense. So from this data source, I would like you to drag down and choose Creator ID here. We're going to need to line these up so that when we have a piece of data from the location data, it's matched with the corresponding smoking data. And that's going to involve 3 criteria. One of those criteria is it has to be from the same person at least, right? We don't want Joe's data matched up from the location matched up with Jill's smoking status. That would not be fruitful. So we want to select the creator ID of one equals the creator ID of the other. Must it not? Must. Okay, next, here, we're going to line up the times, ladies and gentlemen. There's going to be a time stamp associated with the location data. If you pull this down, for this, there's a timestamp for PP location, and we need that timestamp to fall within the start and stop times of the smoking interval, or the non-smoking interval, as it were. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go pull over here on the left the start time. Now, some of you may have it in the opposite kind of ordering. Maybe PP location is left. The point is, PP location, you got to choose the timestamp. That's a location for a certain instant in time, and we need that instant in time to fall within the interval delineated by that interval of smoking. That interval is the start time. And what do you think? If the timestamp for a location needs to fall within the interval, does it need to be equal to the start time, or does it need to be less than the start time, or greater than or equal to, or what? In what case, at the least, what does it need to do? Greater than, and I would say, or equal to. I mean, there's kind of a little bit of debate, but if it starts at a certain time, I'll say greater than or equal to. So it can fall right at the beginning. If it's taken at exactly 5 o'clock, then, you know, it will be, and the interval starts at 5 o'clock, we'll treat it. Okay, and the other clause needs to be the timestamp, ladies and gentlemen, needs to be what? What's the other point? If it's within the interval, we need to consider the start time and the what? Stop time. Okay, so we need this to be, okay, so excuse me. Oh gosh, what am I doing? The start time needs to be less than or equal to the timestamp. In other words, the timestamp can't be before the start time, and the stop time needs to be greater than or equal to, right? The timestamp has to fall betweenst the stop time and the start time. Does that make sense? Yeah. So this one has to be greater than or equal to that. This one has to be less than or equal to the stop time. Are people okay with that? People okay? That's a fairly complex join there, but it's one that's required here. Typically, you'll need, well, often 2 elements in it. Okay? Okay. Who would like this up a little bit longer? A little bit longer? Okay. Okay. So quite commonly, you might match by creator ID and the time, or creator ID and the duty cycle. It's very common. What interval was this from? In this case, we need a little bit more logic because we have a start and stop time. Are people okay? Who would like a little bit more time? Who would like TA help? The TAs would be glad to offer their assistance. Okay? Okay, so if we're done with that, ladies and gentlemen, we can close this. It will remember this after we close it. And I'd like now to go to smoking by location. And I'd like you to now tell me, ladies and gentlemen, how to first create a map. How do I create a map? Remind me. What do I need to do? Okay, longitude and latitude. Latitude goes to what? What does it go to? Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so latitude is going to rows. Now, you'll notice it's kind of annoyingly doing this calculation here when it doesn't need to. Let me teach you a trick. It's not quite a hack, but it's a trick to prevent that from happening. Up here, ladies and gentlemen, under this cylinder, which is used by computer scientists to denote databases, there's a thing that calls auto update worksheet. Turn that off for a minute, and then it won't try to refresh it every time you add something, try to redo it from the start. So let me do that again. If you click that auto update, this has some cost to it. It doesn't provide the sort of guidance and and as much assistance with these. I think they stopped working without the auto update being on, and it isn't. In some ways, it's not as user friendly, but in some ways, it doesn't go hit the database every time. So you can now drag it there and just choose. What do we have to do? We need to change it to dimension. Well, you folks are good. Okay, and now what do we have to do? Drag longitude to columns, and we have to do dimension for that, right? Shall we not? Okay, so now, ladies and gentlemen, if you wanted to calculate it, you do run update. See this little thing here? You could press that, and it will go hit the database. At least it didn't hit it all along the way. It'll go and it will fetch the data. And fetching it is. And in this case, hopefully it won't take horribly long. Joins take long, but Winchell worked on this one. Yeah. In general, the joins, when you put joins in place, it has to do quite a bit more work to match up the data. And this is a case where it's trying to find all these different pieces of data and figure out if they match the criteria to be paired up. And it's often somewhat expensive. And the fact that we're all doing it together is going to be expensive. So are people comfortable with that notion of a join, of that cross-linking of that data? So that for a given item, we'll have both a location and a smoking status for it. I'm glossing over a little bit of detail having to do with, suppose there's multiple locations for a given interval. How are we going to deal with them? Well, the answer is that's what we have to deal with the aggregation. It may have to take the average or have to take the median, etc.
One point that maybe while working with an add is that joins are so slow that mostly for the large scale data sets, right now they completely remove it. So to make it faster, they say, well, it's cheaper to write data multiple times. So for example, if you want to run the same query over and over again on different data sets, so you might as well just write a copy of this data that has all the elements of different parts included, so you don't have to run join over and over again. So basically, some types of databases don't even have joins in them, so you can't really run joins. Basically, the idea behind them is that the data will be duplicated to satisfy the need that previously was satisfied by the join.
Right. So in this case, I think Winchell will sometimes put in place views that will significantly speed it up. In this case, Winchell, it's
Tableau, like a strategy to do the zone and kind of do this. Kind of do for loop. And in that case, it doesn't really consider about any specific type. What actually, if you write a custom query, it would be way more faster because it would take advantage, all the records actually stored. You first store the records, only check it first on the top of it. You don't have to actually scanning through the whole list to do a map.
right.
Records on the left side. So that's why there will be some value to write some custom queries.
Right. So this is take a very long time. So Winchell, we did PP location, PP smoking. Those are the ones that you had worked on. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If anyone would be interested to see the results, actually help them to let them do that 1 megabyte already package. For Worksheet.
Right.
It already has
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so this may not converge in an adequate time here. Okay, so this does bring up a feature of this data. In general, when we need to do larger joins, which are typical for our work, there's often some work on the back end that someone like Winchell will do to try to make it much faster. And there are ways that you can put in place mechanisms that will significantly speed a query up. Some of them are custom queries. Some of them are in the form of indexing to match up data quickly from one table to the other, and in others in the form of derived tables or views. In this case, we're having, it looks like there was not enough mechanisms put into place to make it fast enough for all of us to hit it simultaneously. And it may take several minutes to complete. So, but this is the basic mechanisms by which we join data from one source to another, and that allows us to then graph it out or summarize it in this sort of cross-linked fashion. Okay, so I think we're going to have to leave that going. You know, there's some other examples that I could do, but I think it would be better to just let this guy complete in the fullness of time here. So any questions on the use of Tableau as a tool? Tableau is, yes, Danny.
Sort of like data export, visualization export, any of those things? Like
Right.
You take your map and spit it out as like a PDF or a JPEG or something, or?
Yeah, the export functionality of Tableau is pretty good from my experience. I mean, we've used it to produce a lot of visuals, which we've then exported in one form or another. What I know we've also made use of is the ability for Tableau to import data from a variety of sources. For the exporting, I'm trying to remember, Winchell, did you do some interfaces between Tableau and R at all? For exporting from Tableau to R?
No, but Tableau can export.
Yeah. So it could be read from an Excel file. It could be read from many types of processing software, by SAS, by SPSS, or by R. Output from Tableau.
In terms of your output, I tend to actually include this flow. Very careful about how to output. So I just do screen capture.
Yeah, I've done that quite a lot, quite heavily.
Not because it doesn't export well, but because it's a heck of a lot faster. So graph, done.
Yeah. So for example, I do box plots are very handy to do within this. I've also done a lot in R, but it's very visual and very quick and can give you, the ability to rapidly iterate. And then once they're obtained, you can just do a screenshot of them. Yeah. Philip.
First,
Yeah.
if you did a box plot and you want to show that differences were statistically significant, would you do the analysis in another program and then
I would do the analysis in R for sure.
put, asterisk?
That's right. That's right. And trying to think, I'm pretty sure here, and I'm trying to remember any cases of it, but I think you can annotate these graphs fairly handily with additional text and so on. So rather than being static objects, you can kind of put some information to accompany them that will be helpful. Do you have any comments on that, or any of the TAs, Winchell? Have you placed sort of annotations textually or graphically on Tableau charts?
Directly on the chart.
That's right.
Yes, you can. Right click actually, there's actually just mark on it. And also, if you wanted to several of your shifts to one, then actually for the company, there's also another visualization where we can drag part of your sheet, combine them together, and then kind of into the finalized presentation.
Right.
Yeah, I use ArcGIS quite a bit, and it seems like there's a similar
Mm. You can import from Excel sheets, I'm pretty sure.
Basically, it's all kind of a virtual Tableau of it, but it assumes that we see that it's not kind of changing the data without really knowing it. So basically, but it's especially for like for data reads from Excel or CSV, basically you can directly change it in Tableau. You can also, the only thing you can do is just create a function action, but not that is. I would rather change the original file and then read it.
Yeah. So in short, you could use it to visualize and interactively explore data that's originally in an Excel file. Just you shouldn't use it as the interface to modify that Excel file.
So you hinted at an example before with differences between the start and stop times for smoking. Is there the capacity to calculate that difference in Tableau or?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's the kind you can add columns and calculations.
Yeah. In fact, I'll cancel out of this, but you can keep yours going. But let me show you briefly how to do that. So if I wanted to do that here, what I could do is depend on smoking status, and here I will drag start time here and do this as an exact date, and I'll drag creator ID to the rows here. And one thing I could do would be to define, and this is where it gets specific. I could define a new what's called a calculated field, and this calculated field would be like smoking duration. Now I have to be careful here because this is graphed out in days. You'll notice April 12th, 22nd. So I have to be a little bit careful to do this in days here. And so what I could do is date, diff, and I'm trying to remember, I think it's minute. I want to calculate as precise sort of time, but in units of days. And I'll do start date would be start time, and then I'll do stop time. And then that will calculate the number of minutes, and I'll divide by the number of minutes in a given day. And that would provide for me a smoking duration, which I could then use to sort of indicate the and then I will I could go and I could convert this. This is a Gantt chart there. Oops. I want to do this by exact date. And then I could drag in the smoking duration, and I could use it to set, I think I do it here to the size. And I will set the average of this duration as being sort of the size of this. And so what that would mean is, so Cheryl, some of these, you'll notice these are now measured in sort of fractions of a day that they spend smoking. Yeah, so that's how I do that. Okay? Okay, any other questions?
Do you guys have a license for it?
Yes and no.
So it's free for students.
Education, yeah, free for students who have an educational license. It gets, with many of these academic licenses, it gets fuzzy when you start doing research with it. I'm honestly quite confused.
Maybe can I just say that
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I'd need to learn more about Tablau's pricing model. I'm not certain about that, but I'd be surprised if it was that different. I know, for example, SAS has this what is it, per year per seat, which is really expensive. And I don't think that this adheres to that sort of model. What I do know is they have a version for instructors if you're going to use it for classes. They have a version for students, which I think is geared towards education, but as you say, there's kind of this fuzzy area for research.
Yeah, so they give you a license file if you take a class which requires Tableau. I know it's quite commonly used in academia, though, so it can't be that horrible.
There's a public version when I checked it
Yeah.
before. Obviously, it's gonna have very limited functionality, but.
Right.
I think it's doable. I haven't heard any, I know several people in COVID, and they don't complain about the tens of thousands of dollars a year they're spending on Tableau.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, time is going on, and we need to move to other items. But I will say that Tableau is really, really good for interactive visualization. If you have data coming in over time, you can refresh the data, and it will do the query and put out the new data. It's very good for sort of drilling down and getting an understanding of some of the patterns. You can actually go get item information on particular data items here, and in general, it's a very flexible and accessible tool. There's many features. Obviously, I don't have time to explore. You can drill down to particular data items that are shown in terms of their specifics. This is not a tool that I would use as the kind of final, the tool that I use for final statistical analysis. For that, I would draw data into R, and we do have examples of SQL queries where you can, within R, suck data from these databases, potentially with joins, like this one, and you can then manipulate the data as data frames in R. So you can treat it as, a large set of data as you would data from a spreadsheet or what have you. You can also write it back to databases from R, although we haven't done that. Mostly we just analyze the data originally drawn from the databases. And there are some ways, I'm told, in R, although I haven't used them, to do interactive queries against data frames. This is what I was hearing yesterday. So you can actually ask SQL queries to select subsets of the data from a data frame. SQL is an extremely powerful language. It's a language that I'm going to be teaching to students, which include Cheryl and maybe others in the room this fall who are not from computer science background but want to learn this. But in general, it's a fairly accessible language that can be used within R to drag the same sort of data in and do your final visualizations. R is also the tool that we use for a lot of the machine learning analyses, such as those that William is working on there assiduously in the back, which Narges and Winchell have also worked on. So, and in fact, Raheem as well. So anyway, bit of glimpse of Tableau, some high-level comments on R. Any final questions before we move on?
Really quick question. Can you export the shape files from the map?
Mumble.
SHP files
Yeah, for GIS data. Yeah. So I get your question.
Let's quick and I can see anything longer. The reason I say that is because of the way they do their color coding and categorization.
Yeah.
I wouldn't use this as a final mapping program because there's a potential to actually create some very substantial biases because of the way it does its color coding.
Oh, yeah.
So there's some issues there. It looks like it chops things into percentiles, although I'm not quite sure, and you can get two maps that are colored the exactly same thing as saying totally different things. It's very, very useful.
Very interesting. So
You can do that, going under the hood and change the coloration algorithm.
It didn't look like it was giving a lot of options in terms of the categorization options.
yeah.
That's why I was asking about the support.
One very attractive thing about about Tableau is they're actually, even though it's drag and drop and point and click and so on, it actually is highly customizable. So for example, you can do a new custom SQL string, and I can do select star from PP Wi-Fi left join with whatever, and put in place custom SQL queries. I can also, with some of these sort of components, I think, do a fair bit of customization. So I wouldn't rule it out yet, but I haven't seen anything about GIS shapefiles. I have to say, it does seem to be able to import, from different sources, but I can't say anything about the exporting. Yeah.
So, maybe just say a word about kind of how I use this class. So in the IS class, we run a study over a month where actually many of the sheds come from. So the data quality is a little less first time we do. But for the last half of the class, basically once the data starts flowing in, we spend basically an hour a week. One student will lead an exploration of the data, kind of do a group discussion where we kind of mine through some of the data, look at the visualizations, trying to understand what's going on in the data set as the data's coming in. I think that's kind of where it is, the best place for it. It's supposed to be an interactive system for data exploration. Once you think you've got a handle on what's going on, then you need to warm up the big guns.
But by the way, Cheryl, or someone asked about annotation. You could see that here. So annotate. You can annotate a point, or you can annotate an area. And I just put in place that annotation. So it's a fairly, as Kevin was saying, it's fairly flexible in terms of writing custom text for different regions. You can color it, format it, etc., and put it in place. So there's a fair bit of customizability there once you drill down. There's also a fair bit of ease of use. This is a product which has been around for a while and which has gotten refined over the years. It has heavy use in industry right now, and I think industry forms the bulk of their support financially.
It began its life
It's
as
Stanford, right? Yeah.
That's where it started. Much like ours started package, MATLAB started matrix manipulations, and then they kind of grow into more general.
Questions? Sure. Okay, so that was a glimpse of a